So some of you might be thinking at this point, why are we still meeting? It's the summer and all the school's out. Some of the other Bible studies have stopped, and the reason is there are 32 chapters in this book, and my goal is to get through this entire book in 3 years, which means 10 chapters per year. Which means we're still actually not going to cover 2 chapters. That'll just be on you after you end the course. Those last 2 chapters cover just some very irregular verbs, and it's nothing new. It's just something a little bit irregular. So that's something you can study on your own, but no major concepts. So we're moving on to chapter 10, which again is the last chapter of new material that we're covering before we break for the summer. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll meet again for a reading group to recap some of this and give you a chance to ask some questions before we cut you loose. I'll still have access to my email over the summer, but I won't be checking it every day. I don't even check my email every day as it is. But if you email me within a week, I will get back to you. Any questions you have over the summer. Okay, so as always, as I'm presenting you new material, don't panic. We're starting to get into territory that I'm going to present something to you that doesn't entirely correlate in English. We do it in English, but very differently in Greek. So this is going to sound a little bit alien. Again, if this doesn't make sense the moment I teach it, don't panic. It will, I promise you, with time studying, as with everything else. So just let this material wash over you, and just know that all next week you'll be watching somebody else on YouTube explain it. You'll be doing some readings, some exercises, and hopefully in 2 weeks you'll know what questions to ask if you have any. All right, so first things first, let's review. What is a tense? Does everybody remember what a tense is?
Should end the timing.
Yeah, it's the time of the action is what it's concerned with the most. So far, we've only been changing the voice of the verb, right? We learned the middle passive voice last time. So if I were to just review, what does PIA stand for? Okay, and the tense there is what? Present tense. We're dealing with what is happening right now in this moment, not what is about to happen, not what did happen, but what is currently happening. Active voice. So that's what we've been in for a while. That's the subject acting on an object, and then indicative, which we're not exiting the indicative yet. If you still don't know what indicative is, that's okay. We haven't been monkeying with that right now. Indicative just means we're talking about something that is real, not hypothetical, but something that is concrete. All right, so again, present. What does the M stand for? Middle indicative. And so the middle voice, what we were learning last chapter, is something that is acting on itself. Like I stand, so the standing is the verb. I stand. I'm not doing it to anything else other than myself. So it's the middle voice. And then the passive voice is right when something is being acted upon, rather than the subject acting on the object. We have the subject being acted upon by an object. So that was the passive voice. So that was all by way of review. What we're getting today is a new tense. So when we are exiting the present active indicative, and we're going to be in the imperfect active indicative. You don't need to know these two classifications right now, primary and secondary tenses, but I think it's useful just to put them in front of you so that you can kind of see where we are and where we'll be going in the future. Primary tenses. So I've put this in bold, present. We've been in present this whole time so far. Other primary tenses are future, something that's about to happen, and the perfect tense, which I'll explain in a moment. Secondary tenses are the aorist, imperfect, and pluperfect. Imperfect is what we're getting today. So let's talk about exactly what these mean, and I think it's helpful to keep that at the top of mind, even if we're not going to be covering all of them today. So right now we're moving into the imperfect active indicative, and we're on Croy page 54 if you want to follow along, but you don't need to. It's just the chart there might be helpful to keep in front of you. So the imperfect tense is typically abbreviated as IMPF. Whenever you see IMPF in a sentence, that's standing in for imperfect. Side note, does anyone know why the word abbreviation is so long? Shouldn't it be like a really short? I don't know why either. I was just wondering if you guys did. So the abbreviation for imperfect is IMPF. So, not the same as a simple past tense, which the fancy term for that, which we'll be using, is aorist. So, what's the difference between these? When I use the imperfect tense, here's an example of what that would look like. I was walking. Present tense is I am walking, or I walk. The imperfect tense is talking about something in the past. I was walking. So I think it's helpful to define a couple terms. What does the word perfect mean in your way of using it? When you use the word perfect, what are you trying to say? Oh man, that musical was just perfect. What am I saying? It was great. It was really, really good. That's not actually what the word perfect means. We misuse this word all the time. Perfect means complete. His argument was perfect. That means that there was no way it could have been improved upon. God made the world, and the world was perfect. That means it could not be improved upon. It was finished. It was done. That's what the word perfect means. And so now, what does imperfect mean? Something that is not complete, something that is lacking, not of lower quality necessarily, but it's just not done yet. That building is imperfect, it means it's under construction. Once the building is built, it is perfect. Okay, so the imperfect tense then, as this uncompleted, ongoing thing, it denotes an action that started in the past and is ongoing. It's incompleted, or maybe it was interrupted, or it's continuous. These are all just English approximations to describe what's happening. There's a perfect tense as well, but we won't be worrying about that until well into next year, halfway through next year, chapter 15. So all we need to know is the imperfect tense. What is the aorist tense? Well, aorist tense is simply I walked. I'm describing something that simply happened in the past. Let's use some examples. So, an example use of the imperfect and aorist tenses, how these might be different. What did you do on Sunday? Today's Monday, and I'm asking, what did you do yesterday? But pretend today's Monday, even though today's Sunday. What did you do on Sunday? Well, I walked into church. I sat in a pew. I spoke with my friend, and the pastor preached a good sermon. So let's draw a picture of this. Here is a timeline, and now is right here. We'll say 12 a.m. is right here, or 12 p.m. is right here. We've got 9 a.m. and 6 a.m. So let's map some of these events. What did you do on Sunday? I walked into church. Boom, there's an event that happened. Sometime around 8 a.m. You walked into church. Done. You sat in the pew. Done. You spoke with your friend. And then the pastor preached a good sermon. Sequential actions. Each action is completed prior to the beginning of that next action. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I walked, I sat, I spoke, the pastor preached. These are all just things that happened. With me so far? That's the aorist tense. We use this all the time when we're talking in English. I went to the movies. I had dinner. All right, there's other ways of talking about the past, though. How about this sentence? I walked into church, I sat in the pew, and while the pastor was preaching, imperfect, not a completed action. It started, and now it's ongoing. While the pastor was preaching a good sermon, I spoke with my friend. So let's map these events. We've got our timeline again. So I walked into church, I sat in the pew, and while the pastor is preaching, I spoke with my friend. They're sort of overlapping. Do you see the distinction there? So the imperfect tense, this incompleted tense of talking about the past says it began in the past and now it's ongoing. I walked into church, aorist. I sat in the pew, aorist. While the pastor was preaching, imperfect, I spoke with my friend. Okay? Any questions with that so far? Because I'm going to be building on this.
Aorist is the perfect.
They're different. Aorist is just a simple way. If you're curious what a perfect is an ongoing thing, but then ends. And here's the present moment over here. So aorist is just these one-off events that happen in the past. So here's an example. Jesus was born. It happened in a moment. He was born. He lived. And now, so this is an ongoing thing. But it's completed, and then he died. Do you see the distinction between those two? In English, the distinction doesn't come across because I'm just saying Jesus was born, Jesus lived, Jesus died. It sounds like bullet points, but there's a distinction that's happening. He was born, one moment. He lived, this is a 30-year event, and then he died. It happened in a moment. He was living, and then he was dead. Right? Do you see the distinction between those? It doesn't really come across in English unless I am really bringing your attention to it. All right. We're going to be going through more examples of this all class. So just bear with me. Any questions so far?
And then perfect would be preach the Sermon on the Mount. Get that.
Depends how I'm talking about it.
Okay, that's fine.
Imperfect, you're denoting you're talking about a series of events, and one of the events in your series is ongoing, and there may be other events that happen. So look at this example again. This is why I said this might be a little bit alien, because this is a little bit different than English. I walked into church. It happened. I sat in the pew. It happened. And while the pastor was preaching this ongoing thing, I spoke to my friend. This is the past. This is the future. I don't know, I wrote a P again. It's the past, this is the future. These are bullet point events. Aorist, aorist, aorist. Imperfect.
I think maybe it's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to get it to click, yeah, because I still see all of those as past events. Because I could say, like, technically walking into church, like, it wasn't like like a sat, like
Sure.
So that's why, like, I will understand, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm still.
But the way I'm speaking about it, yes, it's true. Maybe walking into church took 5 minutes. As it typically does. People pulled me aside, and I had to go back to the car because I forgot something, and then we get to the pews, and it takes me 5 minutes to sit down because I got to get Samuel a snack, and we got to get Daniel situated and unpack everything. Okay, maybe that takes some time, but as I'm telling it, I just say I walked into church, and when I say the words I walked into church, that's aorist. When I say, I could have said, I was walking into church, and now the way I'm saying it, that's imperfect. Let's look at one more example. Maybe this will help make this a little bit clearer. So this use of the imperfect is a continuous, an ongoing or continuous action in this instance. Sequential, walked, sat, and then ongoing continuous. While the pastor was preaching, I spoke. All right, let's look at one more example in English before we start Greekifying this. We've got this timeline again. We've got the past, got the future, present moment right now. I walked into church. I sat in the pew. I was speaking with my friend, but then I stopped speaking with my friend because the pastor preached a good sermon. So we got sequential events. I walked into church, I sat in the pew, and then we have this incomplete or interrupted action. I walked into church, I sat in the pew, I was speaking with my friend, but then the pastor preached a good sermon. Any questions there? These words I'm using to describe this, incomplete, interrupted, continuous, ongoing, these are all English words that I'm using to describe what the Greek is trying to get across. And what the Greek is trying to communicate to you is this sort of incomplete, ongoing, continuous thing that happened in the past. Yeah, go for
I
it.
don't ask this, I won't be able to.
Okay, go for it.
Are all of these going to have 6 different things that I have to memorize?
So these are all the way a verb is conjugated is going to impact what kind of tense it is. So I walk, W-A-L-K, present tense. I walked, W-A-L-K-E-D. You just conjugated walked. I was walking, I-W-A-S, W-A-L-K-I-N-G. You're conjugating, you're changing the way it appears. And we're going to be doing the same thing in Greek. Yeah, yeah. So you will have to be able to memorize new forms. Like, so you've got o, ace, a, amen, ete, use. There's your present. O mai, e, etai, amta, este, antai is your middle voice. And we're going to get a new one, a new paradigm for the imperfect.
Is will aortic.
Aorist.
Will aorist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some of them will be similar, yeah. But we're just giving you one at a time. You're only getting the active imperfect today. Next chapter, next year, or next fiscal year, next academic year, is the middle imperfect. So we're only getting the active imperfect. And then we'll be in the imperfect for a little while, and then you'll get something else. Okay. So any questions right now on what the imperfect is? All right, let's keep going. So here's what it looks like. Forms of the imperfect, active, indicative. So what's our paradigm verb that we've been using is luo, right? And this is the stem, lambda, upsilon, and this is the ending, omega. We've got o, ace, a, amen, ete, usi, or with that movable end, usin. And those are the endings for the present. Now we're going to change the endings a little bit. This one's a two-parter, though. We don't actually just tack on some endings at the end. It's got this little augment that you put in the beginning. So at the front half of the word, you've got this epsilon. At the back half of the word, you've got your new endings. And you sandwich those two around your stem. And now that gives it the imperfect tense, the imperfect sense, which is a tense. So eluan, elues, elue with a movable n, eluamen, eluite, eluan. But check this out. The first plural and second plural are the same. Those haven't even changed. The only thing that's added, if you're keeping track of the accents, which I don't recommend you do, but if you are, you might have noticed those are changing as well. The only other thing that changed here is we put that epsilon in the beginning. So we've got this stem, lambda upsilon, and that's our paradigm verb luo, which means to loose or to destroy. And I put an epsilon at the beginning, and I put this ending at the end, and now it is I was loosening. So the paradigm you're going to have to remember is on, ace, a, amen, ete, on. Right? You can already see some similarities with what you've seen before. With the present, o, ace, a, and now with the perfect, it's on, es, e. And then in the present, amen, ete, use. And in the imperfect, it's amen, ete, on. A little bit different. So when you're reading and you see a word and you start to wonder what tense is it? Well, these endings, these epsilons will jump out at you. You'll see this where a place where a verb should be, and you see this epsilon at the beginning. You're probably dealing with an imperfect. You look at the end; it's got one of these endings on, es, e, amen, ete, on, and you'll just after you see it enough times, you'll know you're in the imperfect. Yeah.
The ons, you just have to use context.
Oh, right, because you've got some nouns that look like they have a or the
Third person plural and first person singular, because they're the same.
Yep. You'll just have to use context. These you're talking these two right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Context. Yep. Yeah, whether or not you see two people listed or if it's just one person that's in the narrative. Yeah. I would say very rarely, if at all, a verb will just leave you hanging and you won't know which one it is. It'll make sense based off of the narrative. Good news about. Oh yeah, go ahead.
One more question.
Yeah.
The E
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, is that usually gonna signify like a past tense verb?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to see that with unless your verb begins with an e. There are some verbs that begin with an e, and we're going to get into what happens there as a special case. But yeah, so you see an epsilon, and you've got one of these endings, and that should sort of be a red flag that says, okay, I'm in the imperfect.
How are you pronouncing it? Does it have a breathing mark with it?
No breathing marks. So that yeah, a breathing mark looks like that. Smooth breathing mark looks like that. Yeah, so this is a rough breathing mark, and that's a smooth breathing mark. I don't know why the medieval scribes did that, but we are just working with what they gave us when they were recording this. Anytime you've got a word that begins with a vowel, they signify, is it a smooth breathing mark or is it a rough breathing mark? The smooth breathing mark doesn't change the pronunciation at all, but they felt the need to put it in there anyway. Yeah, backwards comma. That's the only thing that changes the pronunciation, where it aspirates and gives it an H sound. But these are all smooth breathing marks. Yeah. Omicron? Yeah.
Reading it and not hearing it, and not, like, because like men, like
Mm-hmm.
plural, first person.
Yeah. Yeah. Omega is pronounced O. Omicron is ah. Yeah. So eluan, elues, elue, eluamen, eluite, eluan. So it's just sort of that long A. Ah. Don't get tripped. It doesn't really matter. If you pronounce your omicrons as omegas, it doesn't matter. We're not learning to speak this. And quite frankly, the pronunciation, the Erasmian pronunciation that we're working with, is not the same pronunciation that a native Greek speaker would use today. So since we're learning to read this language and we're not trying to be conversational with it, the pronunciation is fluid. Doesn't really matter. Okay. Any more questions? Good news is that the imperfect tense is limited to the indicative mood. Therefore, you do not have a new infinitive to learn. Remember, with the middle, you had the este ending, and that was for the middle passive infinitive. There is no infinitive in the imperfect, so you don't have that to learn. So you gotta celebrate the small wins. Okay, let's just start looking at some examples of this. Examples of the imperfect tense. Ha apostolos eididaske ton aklan. So we've got this word eididaske. I've got my epsilon in the beginning, and I've got this ending here. And I know it comes from this word didasko, but I'll see it in the context of the sentence like this, eididaske. And I know that means the apostle was teaching the crowd. That's what it's going to look like in a sentence. Amen, amen, ento oiko. So our word is meno, but I've slapped an epsilon on the beginning. The ending doesn't change from the present. Amen, amen, ento oiko. We were remaining in the house. I'm going to keep going like this, but slow down if something doesn't make sense. Let's look at another one. Haduloi ebalon lithus. So the question was asked, how do I know if this on is first person singular or third person plural? Well, I've got hoi duloi, which is plural. So context tells me hoi duloi ebalon lithus. The servants were throwing stones. Make sense so far? What happens if our verb begins with an epsilon? Do we say aaron? No. It's going to change. No, it's going to change. So we've got this word akuo, and we're not going to do eakuon, because that sounds strange. And these as the way languages develop, they develop orally, and then we capture what's happening orally in the written word. And people perhaps at some point may have said eakuon, but that's laborious. It was better to say ekuon instead of eakuon, ekuon. So if I have a verb that begins with a vowel, we're not going to just slap the epsilon on. We're going to lengthen that vowel. So let's say we've got a verb here, akuo, which means I hear. And if I were to put an epsilon on it, that alpha is going to turn into an eta. And then the ending will be the same. Ekuon. Instead of eakuon, ekuon. I was hearing or I was listening. Then about this word, el pizzo. I don't know if you have that yet, but you do now. El pizzo. I hope we're not saying el pizzon. That epsilon's going to turn into an eta, and we'll have el pizzon. And we'll just be doing this again with this word ophelo. I must or I am obligated to do something. We're not going to do eophelon. That epsilon that's attached there is going to make this omicron turn into an omega. Ophelon. And you'll just see this in print enough times that it'll start to make sense. Like as you're reading these words, there's certain letters that are just going to jump out at you. Like you've got kappa, omicron, upsilon, and you'll say, well, this looks kind of like akuo, and then you'll remember, oh yeah, akuo begins with an alpha, and so that alpha is going to change into something else when I try to put an epsilon in front of it. What about this word here, iskuo, which means iskuon means strong. Iskuo means I have power. I have ability. When you put your epsilon in front of the iota, for some strange reason, it just stays a iota. But the only thing that changes is the accent is going to change. So then, how do I know that this is imperfect if that letter hasn't changed in the beginning? The ending, right? The ending does change, even if that first letter doesn't change. You know, it's funny when I was reviewing this has been a really good review for me getting ready for these classes because I completely forgot that an epsilon in front of a iota in the imperfect tense remains a iota. But that never tripped me up. Even though I forgot that law, that rule, it didn't trip me up because I knew the endings. And when I saw that ending, I knew I was working in the imperfect. So don't look at this chart and think I have to commit this to hard memory. Just know that it's there. And as you're reading, you'll gain an understanding even without memorizing this. I mean, you should know it's there and you should study it, but as you're reading, don't worry about recalling that chart in your mind, doing some mathematics with the letters to try and yield the result. Just read enough and you'll absorb it. Same thing happens with the upsilon as with the iota. Okay. Something similar is happening with diphthongs. And we can just sort of cover these as we go. Just like up here, the alpha became an eta, an alpha iota becomes an iota subscript. So this word iro, to take up or to lift up, becomes aaron. So rather than go through all of these right now, I'd like to just kind of keep going through some examples and you'll see them in play. But just know that this is what's happening. Whenever there is a vowel at the beginning of your verb, your epsilon is going to look different or is going to disappear and become something else. All right. So let's look at some examples of this. We've got this word, ekuon tein phonein tu prophetu, hoti methetesemi. The word is akuo. I'm putting an epsilon in front of it. It becomes ekuon. So what happened? My alpha lengthened to an eta. Eges tu adelphus eis to ploion hoti apostolase. What's our verb here? Eges. Remember that epsilon sigma ending is your imperfect ending, so that should tip you off that you're in the imperfect there. But we've got our stem here, ago. I put my epsilon in front, becomes eges, and my alpha lengthens to an eta. What about this sentence? Hadulas esthie ton arton ento oiko hoti hamatalos estin. Just trying to, that sentence doesn't really make sense, but I'm just trying to make sentences with words that you know. The servant was eating the bread in the house because he is a sinner. Esthio becomes esthie because epsilon plus epsilon for some reason equals eta, and that epsilon lengthens to an eta. I guess the bread wasn't his, that's why eating it in the house made him a sinner. Yeah, exactly. He was supposed to be gluten-free.
It's lengthening. You really haven't lengthened it, thing.
Yeah.
You just substitute.
Well, the epsilon was pronounced e, and the eta is pronounced e. A me, or I mean, what are some of the examples all the way back in the
Like long vowels instead of short.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe if I look at that chart all the way back in the beginning of the book. How is the epsilon pronounced? According to the book, met. Epsilon is pronounced e, met. But an eta is pronounced obey, because the difference is e and a. It's lengthened.
Okay.
Short vowel to a long vowel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about the word. That's what.
No, sorry. Thank you for asking that, in case someone was confused. Yeah, we're lengthening the vowel. Met becomes obey, a. We've got this other one, egero, right? Is that word for raise? So, egerete tus necrus ectu thanatu hati apostola esti. So we've got this ending here in both our present and our imperfect is ete. I'm slapping that epsilon in the beginning, and that's lengthening the value of the vowel. Egerete, y'all were raising the dead from death because you are apostles. Okay, everyone good with that so far? Again, rather than try and memorize this mathematics with these letters, this letter plus this equals this, just know that vowels change when you have an epsilon there, and you'll start to gain an intuitive sense just by reading enough of it.
Be pretty good with the root of, because like raising, there's like 4 letters that are same, and then it's right, like I have to get really good with the roots of my verbs.
Yeah, so the root here is that gamma, epsilon, iota, rho.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. A gay rho. Actually, the root involves this epsilon as well. A gay, and then that's the stem, and then the ending is that omega in the first person present. It's just when I put an epsilon in it, this changes to an eta.
How do you pronounce that verb? Example of be there, is that useful? Can't even say it.
Eruskan is how I pronounced it. Yeah, Eruskan.
Rusco.
I wouldn't say that my pronunciation is correct. If just me looking at it right now, I would say Eruskan. Eruskan to tekna and to cosmo hati agathoi estin. They were finding, so herisko being the verb, eruskan, they were finding the children in the world. All right, let's keep moving just because I want to make sure we cover everything. One more thing to deal with these imperfects. So sometimes you have some verbs with a prefix. So one of the new verbs that you're going to get today is anabino, which means to go up. So katabino would be to go down, anabino to go up. But this verb has a prefix, which means this verb has 2 parts to it. Your prefix ana, meaning up, and bino, walking, going. Anabino, going up. And so when we put anabino in the perfect tense, the epsilon isn't going to go in the beginning, as with everything else. It's going to go in between the prefix and the rest of the word. So instead of anabino, it becomes anebinon. Eston. So anebinon eston iran hati methetesemi. I was going up. to the temple because I am a disciple. So this one, I just was a little more explicit. So our prefix is ana plus our epsilon, bine is our stem, and then on our ending. This little alpha and this epsilon do a duel, and the alpha loses, and it becomes anebinon. And that's what's happening with prefixes. Check out this other word that you're going to get today. Katabino means to go down. Exact same thing happens. We've got kata as our prefix, epsilon, bine, ace. And the alpha is going to lose that duel. The epsilon's going to win, and we're going to get katebines. Eistain thalasan, hati apostolese. You were going down to the sea because you are an apostle. All right. Here's another word that has a prefix, apothnesko. Apa, right there is our prefix. Thnesko is our end. Apa plus epsilon, thneske. The omicron is going to lose out, and it's going to turn into apethneske. So hamartalos apethneske. The sinner was dying, ente eremo, in the desert. The sinner was dying in the desert, hati hakosmos panirasestin, because the world is evil. Another word with a prefix that you're going to get, sunago. So what does soon mean? Have you gotten that word yet? Soon means with, and ago means what? To lead. Lead with means to gather in Greek. So with lead, take these two words, sunago means gather. Sunago means I gather, or I gather together. But sunago has a prefix, soon, and then the ending, ago. So same thing is happening. We've got soon plus epsilon, and our stem, and then our ending. Instead of having that alpha hanging out there, we have sunegomen, tusadafus este ecclesia, hati agathoi esmen. We were gathering the brothers into the church because we are holy. Again, don't get anxious or tripped up over this. If you just see it in print enough times, you won't even think about it. It'll become second nature with just enough exposure to it. Any questions so far? So far what we learned is, what is the imperfect? It's this sort of ongoing, continuous, uncompleted, interrupted action in the past. How do we make it? We have these endings on se, amen, ete, on, and then we slap an epsilon in the beginning. However, if a verb begins with a vowel, it doesn't look like an epsilon, it looks like something else. And if the verb has a prefix, that epsilon is going to slide in between the prefix and the word. Okay? All right. Does anybody feel like, oh no, this is too much? I've gone too far now. I'm over my head. No? Okay.
There's no far after this first.
Right, exactly. So we've got 2 weeks of this, and then we'll do some reading again together, and then you have the rest of the summer to review and let that sink in. All right. So let's look at one more thing here. This is also imperfect, but this is the imperfect of eme, right? This state of word. So this is all review right here. You have this, eme, I am, ego eimi, what Jesus says all the time, I myself am. Eme, esti, or estin. You've had that since chapter 1. Esmen, este, ac. You've had those since chapter 1 as well. So that's review. The present indicative of ame. But we know that ame is a very irregular verb. So when we put ame in the imperfect, it is going to change. But I wouldn't worry too much about this because you're going to see these all the time. I would say ein right here, which is the equivalent of was, is probably one of the most common, if not the most common, barring articles, the most common word in the New Testament was. Ein. So this word ein is just going to get burned into your mind. Amen, ace, ein, amen, et te esan. Kind of has a rhythm to it. Amen, ace, amenete, asan. Very common. You must know these. But yeah, like I said, this word right here is just going to open up a whole new world to you because it appears all the time. Think about it. I was a member of the church. I was young. Now I'm old. This word was is just as common as is. Right? Okay. That's it for new material. Well, let's flex it a little bit. Using examples of this word, emi, in the imperfect. So, ento oiku to apostolou, amen. I was, amen, in the house of the apostle. Or, in the house of the apostle I was, which is good Greek syntax, not good English syntax. Ento oiko to apostolou, amen, I was. Ace pistos methetes ente ecclesia. So right here, ace, you were, not you was, but you were, pistos methetes, a faithful disciple, ente ecclesia, in the church. Ace pistos methetes ente ecclesia. And here we are, the granddaddy of them all, the most common word in the New Testament, ein. Ha apostolos ein kakos. Alahohuios ein agathos. The man was bad, but the son was good. Amen. We were. Entoploiou amen meta tu prophetu. We were in the boat with the prophet. And second person plural, ete, y'all. Uk ete, y'all weren't. Uk ete douloi tes hamartias. Y'all were not servants of sin. Asan, they were. Asan ha angeloi ento urano. The angels were in heaven. Were the angels, or the angels were in heaven. Okay. Any questions with that? Read it enough, see it enough, and it'll make sense.
Yeah.
Some of the go ahead.
Yeah. You have is on at the very end, syntactically, and
You sure could, yeah. Like I put one of these. I put it at the end. I was trying to right here, yeah, right at the end. I was trying to just show it in different places, but yeah. Remember, with that's one of the beautiful things about Greek. Is you've got these declension endings that your sentence structure is very fluid, and what you where you place the words is sort of like putting the emphasis on certain components in the sentence. Yeah. The angels were in heaven. Eson ha'angeloi ento urno. Let's look at some of our new vocabulary. So ago means to lead. How do you memorize that? I'll go. I'll lead. Ago. I lead. Yep. Iro means to lift up, to lift something up, and then to sort of take it away. This is what Jesus does in the New Testament to us. Sort of raises us up, raises us from the dead, and takes us away with himself. Anabino. So here's one of those prefix verbs. Ana means up, and then bino, which you've seen before, is sort of I walk. Anabino, I go. I do not know what this means on a basis, but apparently the book thought that was helpful.
That'd be the verb, like Jesus saying, I'm going up to Jerusalem.
You always go up to Jerusalem. You always go up to the temple. Exactly. That's the word you see. What's that?
You go up north, yeah.
Yeah, you go up north. Sure. Certainly. Remember, we got this word erchomai last time, right? Erchomai means what? Sort of to go or walk. And we have this word apo. We have that from previous chapter. What does apo mean? From. Apo erchomai becomes ap erchomai, to go away, to depart. So that's just a compound word that if you just know the pieces, you'll recognize. Another one, apothnesko. I don't know what thnesko means, but apothnesko means to die. Apokteno means to kill. I used to get these mixed up all the time, apothnesko and apokteno, to die and to kill. Apostolos, that should be pretty easy. What does apostello mean? I send, right. So an apostolos is that thing that is sent. So what is an apostle? What's the difference between a disciple and apostle? Disciples are students of Jesus. Apostles are students that Jesus has sent. That's when they become apostles and no longer just disciples. Apostolos, those that have been sent. Heron means temple. And katabino, the difference between anabino, to go down. Heron. Yeah, there's a rough breathing mark there at the beginning. Iota, rough breathing mark. Heron. Mellow means I am about to, or I am going to do something. I'm about to go to church. Mellow ecclesia. I am about to go to church. I don't have, anyone have some mnemonic devices jumping out at him for that one? He's always about to do something, but he doesn't, because he's super mellow. Oh, maybe. Ophelo means I ought, or I should, or I must, or I owe somebody something. Para here is another preposition. Can mean from something, or when you're using it with a genitive or with a dative, beside something, you're being baptized beside the Jordan River, among, alongside, in parallel. Sunago, this is a word that we just saw in one of our example sentences. So soon means what? With. And then ago, we just learned. Ago means to lead. To lead with means to gather in Greek. Where's the word synagogue come from? Well, synagogue is just a place where you gather. Synagogue. Sunago. And then huper means on behalf of something or above. So those were all of our new words. So that's it for new material here. On the last page, we'll cover this next time, just some study strategies for over the summer. I also attached in there, you don't have to read that if you don't have time, but I thought you might enjoy looking at it, because what we're talking about with Greek is we're not just learning the language because it's fun to read the scriptures in the original language, but because it changes how it hits you. It changes me. There is meaning that is simply not captured in English that comes along in Greek. And so anytime I can point to that and say, hey, this is why this is worthwhile, I will. So what I've given you is an example of a little paper that was written about Mark's use of this imperfect tense and why the imperfect tense matters. Think about what it means when I say, Jesus saved me. And I'm in English. What tense is that? Jesus saved me.
Past.
It's past, but I'm using that aorist tense, this moment that happened in the past. And in English, that's sort of all I have to work with. I could say Jesus was saving me, but that doesn't, that carries a different meaning than what I'm trying to get across. But what if I use the imperfect tense? Jesus saved me. It happened, and there is an ongoing effect. It started in the past, but it's still happening. Jesus raised from the dead. Raised from the dead. Aorist, something that just happened in the past. But that's not what actually happened. What happened is he's raised from the dead and now is in this exalted, raised state. So the imperfect tense has a nuance that English doesn't have that is important. So this paper I gave you is this sort of just Mark's use of the imperfect tense and ways that he uses it, purely for your own intellectual enjoyment, but just to show you that this matters and there's a reason why it matters. He's also going to get into this article some other Some other uses of the imperfect that we didn't go over. He says the continuous action, the inceptive action, meaning I began to teach, the habitual action, I'm always teaching. But I don't want you to get tied up over these words. These are all English words that we're using to try and approximate the sense that the Greek is communicating. What the Greek is communicating is the moment the event started was in the past, and then it is continuing. That's what the Greek is saying. How do I communicate that into English? Well, I could say here, he entered into the synagogue, so aorist there, he entered into the synagogue and taught. But if I'm using it in the imperfect, it's he started and is going over. So I could say he entered into the synagogue and began to teach. That's the inceptive use. So people love to take apart Greek grammar and say, well, this is the inceptive use of the imperfect, or this is the habitual use of the imperfect. Really, they're just trying to describe something that the Greeks never really thought about, and they're trying to get a PhD in it. They're just trying to, I'm the inventor or the discoverer of this new way of using this tense. Not that they're wrong, but what's important? The imperfect is started in the past and is a continuing action. Great. So this is good reading. If you just want to peruse it and see why the imperfect tense is important and how it changes your reading of the text. We've got a couple more minutes, so just I'll pause there if there are any other questions, but I'd love to just look at some more examples with the remaining time we have.
So like in the
Yeah.
Gospels,
Mhm.
is most of it written? Does it flip back and forth between the present active indicative, or mostly they're talking about the past because they're talking about what
Mhm.
Jesus did? You know what I mean? Like when you're
Right.
reading the actual text,
The-
is it both?
The actual text is using, let me scroll up to the beginning here. The actual text is using all of these. All, right.
Because Mark is saying, like, I'm just trying to think about like a lesson.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Like some kind of exegetical move that you can make that I can point to the grammar, and the grammar is instructive here. Yeah, that paper is going to go through the way some ways that Mark.
How that does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Gospels and all of the New Testament, as you read it, are using all of these tenses, and not necessarily interchangeably, but they're bouncing between them. They're using them all at the same time. Sometimes there's this thing called a historical present, which we'll get to, where the beginning of a narrative is going to begin past tense, but once the narrative gets going, they switch into the present tense. It's understood that we're talking about something that happened in the past, but now that the story gets going, we're going to talk about it like it's happening right now.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah, they'll do that. Good. Okay, yeah, let's just, with the 5 minutes that we have left, let's just look at a couple of these, just so that you can see them before we get to work at them. He doxa tu theou aperkatai, apo tes ecclesias, hati ha prophetes apothneske. Hadoxa tu theou aperkatai. Yeah, the glory of God, aperkatai. So, erkamai means what? To come or go. Then, aperkamai, we learned, comes from. And what is this ending here? Etai. Remember, erkamai is a deponent, so we never see it in the active sense. We just have omai, etai, amata, este, antai. So, the glory of God is coming from aperkatai, is coming from the church, tes ecclesias, hati ha prophetes apothneske, because the prophet is dying. So all present tense. But this sentence down here changes a little bit. Houtos ha anthropos, this the man, or this man, apethnesken. All right, so what's going on here? We have apothnesko, is that word to die, apothnesko. Apothneske, he dies, but now down here, apethnesken. So I've got that epsilon there. Whoops. I've got that epsilon there instead of Omicron. So there's that augment that's getting sandwiched in between the prefix and the rest of the word. Apathnesken. And then I have this perfect ending. So hutasa anthropos apathnesken. Well, how would that translate? This man was dying. This man was dying. Huper to adelphu autu. So here's one of the new words you got on behalf of his brother. All genitive. On behalf of his brother. Kai edidaske ton leon. Peri agapes. So edidaske. What's the root word? If you were to look that up in the dictionary, what would you see? Didasko. So edidaske means what? Was teaching the people, ton leon, peri agapes, about love. Why do we see in this section here edidaske, and over here I see apathnesken with a nu. Yeah, it's a movable nu. Right, the next word here, huper, begins with a vowel. So we're going to put that nu there. Over here, though, the next word begins with a consonant. So it's going to end in a vowel. Yeah, it might not sound funny to us just because we're English speakers, but if this is a living language for you, it sounds better.
Pause.
Yeah, it has more of a verbal a quality to it. Yeah, so this man was dying, apethnesken was dying, huper to adelphu autu, on behalf of his brother, kai edidaske ton leon peri agapes, and was teaching the people about love. One more example I want to do in the last 2 minutes that we have. If you go to Croy, page 55, I didn't put this in my handout. Just because Greek is it was a living language and still is today. Sometimes spelling is inconsistent. And so there's one instance in which this inconsistency will appear in the New Testament. So check out about here on the page that I'm pointing. Mellow means what? He's a super mellow guy because he's always about to do something, but he never does. So mellow means I am about to. Amelon or emelon mean the same thing. Sometimes for that word, for some reason, the epsilon is the augment, and sometimes that augment appears as an eta. Why? Natural development of the Greek language. But in this sentence here, number 3, you see an example of that happening. Amelite. So, pros thanaton age hahoras tes hamatias. Who wants to give this sentence a shot? So this is our nominative case. Hadas tes hamartias. He hadas tes hamartias. Yeah, the way of sin, or the road of sin, the way of sin, age. So our verb there was what? So ago, right, means I lead. So he hadas tes hamartias, age, leads, pros thanaton. So to death leads the road of sin. The way of sin leads to death. Humes, y'all plural, humes de, but you, amelite. What does amelite mean? Were about to. Y'all were about. Por you esthai. What's this ending here? It's infinitive. Right. Omai e etai amatha. Estha is the second person plural, but esthai is that deponent infinitive, middle passive infinitive. But you were about to go in it, on it. The way of sin leads to death, and you were about to go on it. That's what the sentence is saying. All right, I know that was a lot. We've got, please email me if you have any questions. You have 2 weeks, and then we'll just do a reading session together, and then you have all summer to work and absorb this. Actually, you don't have all summer because I'm eating into your summer right now. Summer has already started and is a continuing event.
When does it start in the fall?